Preston Manning, thanks a lot for talking about Maclean.
Okay, thank you.
At your conference, seventh one, you were just
Yes,
telling me
yes.
this is the seventh one. First general question about that. Is it possible in a nutshell to say how you've seen the conference evolve over the years? How does it differ now than what it was when you were setting out with this
Well, we
thing?
position it as sort of a meeting of the conservative movement as distinct from the parties. Like the party, there's party people here, but we say the movement includes the think tanks, the interest groups that are push market-oriented ideas, the training institutes, so the critics, students that are kicking tires. So it's kind of a broader thing, and it started with that idea, but very small. But it's growing now to 700, 800, 900 people that come, and from across the country. So we've been pleased with how it's evolved. It's really a get-together of the movement people.
As journalists, it's always interesting for us because we get definitely a conservative perspective, but quite a wide-ranging conservative perspective here.
Yeah.
Do you find, as you become more of an established event on the Ottawa calendar, that there's pressure for you to avoid sensitive subjects or to take on certain subjects? Does that kind of come into play in organizing?
Well, there's a bit of that, but it's not the same as a party convention. Where like a party convention, these no matter what party you're talking about, they're tightly controlled now because they're desperately afraid of some mistake, somebody going off on a tangent, or particularly if you're a governing party, something that's at variance with where the government, then you've got a big problem.
Yeah.
But this is a much more relaxed environment. We have different perspectives on the issues, and people will discuss them, but there's no vote, there's no resolution at the end. So I think it's a more relaxed, and therefore there's an opportunity to discuss the pros and the cons of different positions that you don't find at the tightly managed party conferences.
I want to ask you about two or three of the themes that seem to be represented here, but maybe I could start with energy and the environment, because I happened to catch both. You had a premier's panel, premier's panel here that was focused around that, but I also heard an expert sort of discussion around market solutions to environmental problems, and we think carbon tax, I guess, as being or carbon prices, as being the sort of headline one of that. What do you think about that issue? On the one hand, I would argue that the purest description of a conservative approach to policy that I ever hear at these things is people talking about the need for free market instruments to put a price on pollution. On the other hand, despite the fact that it seems like such a robust conservative position, it doesn't have a lot of traction with big parts of the conservative political movement in this country. Why does that dichotomy exist, do you think?
Well, I think it's something that has to develop. I use this argument that conservation, conservative, come from the same root, that living within your means, which is the heart of fiscal conservatism, is actually an ecological principle. We have to live within our means ecologically, so it's no big jump. And that conservatives profess to believe in markets, and therefore ought to prefer market-based approaches to dealing with pollution to massive government intervention. The way if people are hung up about carbon pricing or climate change, I said, then don't start there. Your conservative principle, start somewhere else. Start with garbage. Start with industrial and household waste. You can apply pricing mechanism, market mechanisms. Start with water. Now, southern Alberta, there's water shortages. Start with if you've got a hang up here, but don't throw out the whole concept that your market concepts actually can solve something. Don't throw it out because you're hung up on one application. And we can kind of say that at this conference, where if you said it at a party conference, it would be seen as controversial, and it would just cause a headache for people.
I think it's because people equate putting a price on carbon with raising taxes, right? And there's a natural conservative version to anything that sounds like you're talking about raising taxes. To me, it seems almost as simple as that.
That's a challenge, and then of course you can get into, you can have offsetting taxes. If you don't want it to have an effect on people's bottom line, you can reduce some other tax in order to accommodate that price. But I almost don't get into that. If I find someone's hung up on that, then say, okay, well, apply your conservative principles to some other form of environmental protection, but don't abandon the whole field because of your apprehensions in this particular area.
Another policy area or a preoccupation of government that I associate with you is the idea of democratic reforms, government being more responsive to grassroots opinion. My impression being around Parliament Hill here is that has waned in recent years, and one of the reasons, but not the only reason, is because Senate reform seems to have been just blocked in.
There's just a discouragement. The government, to be fair, put its democratic eggs in the Senate reform basket, and we can take some of the blame or the credit for that. We hammered away on that for years and for years. But then the court virtually made it impossible to go down that route, which is it took away the one major democratic initiative the government was committed to. So I think it's discouraging to democratic conservatives that that was cut off, not by an action of the government so much, but by an action of the court.
Where should people redirect their energies now if they're interested in that side of politics?
Well, I still wouldn't. I think there's going to be a contest between to what extent do some of these court decisions end up being anti-democratic, and that is a good one. The public showed that we have polls to show a large number of Canadians want that institution reformed, and now they differ on what they mean by that, but they want that reform. The fact that the court has thrown a roadblock right in the front of that becomes a democratic challenge. Is when the Supreme Court is dictating democratic policy, is that really something that the court should be doing? I think it's going to show put some more light on analyzing the role of the court.
We're not even at the midpoint of the conference yet, so I was curious about what sorts of things you're looking forward to seeing, what themes are really top of mind for you as you look at the rest of the weekend.
Well, our polling shows these economic issues at the top of the mind with the public, so that's why we've got so much emphasis on what does it mean to move forward on the economy, move forward on energy and the environment and the economy. But the other thing that our polling showed is this concern about security at home and abroad has come up on the scale. Yes, but quite significantly. So responding to that, we've got a number of speakers. We have an Islamic scholar from the U.S. who's going to talk about Islamic extremism. We have Martin Lee, the father of the democratic movement in Hong Kong, talking about the threat of Beijing's state-directed democracy versus citizen-directed democracy. And I think Jason Kenney, who's going to give the last address, one of his first as defense minister, is going to touch on the Ukrainian-Russian situation. So that concern about security is certainly, it's getting a lot more attention here than, say, it would have 2 years ago.
Picking up on what you've just been saying, obviously you've always shown a great concern and sensitivity about the place of faith in the public square in Canada. Are you concerned by the way Islam is being depicted in some of the debates surrounding security and terrorism? How would you suggest that people should talk about the fact that obviously some of these concerns do raise questions about radical Islam without, I guess, widening the rhetoric to the point where it's intimidating to people who are moderate and great Canadian citizens who are
my
Muslims?
experience with dealing with extremism, whether it's within your own camp or political parties or on the religious side, is the best people to deal with it are the moderates of that same faith, because they understand the extremists far better than someone from the outside.
Right.
So I think if that's going to be dealt with, it has to be dealt in the final analysis by the moderates within that community. And what others of us that are outside that community can do is support them and encourage them. And that's why I'm quite interested to hear what this Islamic scholar has to say on that, because he's a Muslim, he understands that community, but he himself is alarmed by the extremism.
Do you like getting back to Ottawa, Preston, or are you glad to be away from
here? No, I don't mind coming to Ottawa. I don't miss the question period or that part of it.
But the media, you missed the media.
Oh yes, that's right. I knew I was groping for something.
Beautiful. Thanks for talking to Maclean's. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
See you again.
Okay.
Bye-bye.